I stood frozen in the hallway, watching through my slightly open bedroom door as my wife Mara was tangled with another man in our bed. The sheets we had picked out together for our anniversary were now witness to her betrayal of everything we had built over 12 years of marriage. Her laughter echoed through our quiet house like broken glass, cutting through any remaining illusions I had about our relationship. "Thomas will never know," she whispered to her lover, her voice full of cruel amusement. "He's too clueless to suspect anything. The man doesn't pay attention to anything that matters." The casual way she dismissed me, like I was some kind of fool who deserved to be deceived, hit harder than seeing her physical betrayal. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake driven by passion. This was calculated cruelty from someone who thought I was too stupid to protect myself. But what Mara didn't know was that the camera I had installed in our bedroom corner just 2 weeks earlier was capturing everything. Every laugh, every cruel word, every moment of her betrayal was being recorded in high definition. My hand trembling slightly, I reached for my phone and pressed record on the security app, saving the file that would eventually destroy the lies she had been building around our marriage. I walked quietly to my home office, closing the door behind me before sitting down in front of the computer where I kept all the evidence I had been gathering. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed calm as I looked directly into the webcam. "My name is Thomas Hale," I said, speaking barely above a whisper so Mara wouldn't hear me from the bedroom. "Before I tell you how this nightmare started and how it ended with justice being served, I need to ask you for one important favor." I paused, taking a deep breath as I processed what I had just witnessed in my own bedroom with my own wife and a man I had never seen before in my life. Please comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because I want to see how far this story reaches people who understand what betrayal feels like. I continued, my voice growing steadier as I thought about sharing this experience with others who might have faced similar situations. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear is something that happened under my own roof, in the home I thought was safe and filled with love. I reached for the folder on my desk containing weeks of recordings that Mara had no idea existed, evidence that would soon expose the truth about who she really was. The betrayal I had just witnessed didn't happen overnight. Looking back, I could see the signs that I had ignored or explained away because I loved my wife and trusted her completely. 3 months earlier, Mara had organized a dinner party with her co-workers from the marketing firm where she worked. I had spent hours preparing food and cleaning our house to make sure everything was perfect for her colleagues. During dinner, while I was serving dessert, Mara made a comment that should have warned me about her true feelings. "Thomas has such old man energy for someone who's only 52. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to my grandfather instead of my husband." Her co-workers laughed at my expense while I forced a smile, gripping my wine glass tightly to keep my hands from shaking with humiliation. I tried to convince myself that she was just making conversation or trying to be funny for her friends. But then I overheard her whisper to her closest work friend while they thought I was in the kitchen. "He's honestly pathetic. I feel like I'm wasting my life with someone who has no ambition or excitement left in him." The cruel honesty in her voice as she dismissed our entire marriage like it was a burden she was forced to carry should have prepared me for what was coming. The changes in Mara's behavior became more obvious after that dinner party, but I kept making excuses for her because I couldn't accept that the woman I loved was capable of such calculated deception. She started working late several nights each week, claiming that her company had landed a big client that required extra hours and attention. When she came home, she often smelled like cologne that wasn't mine, but she explained it away by saying she had been in meetings with male clients. "Stop being so controlling, Thomas," she would snap whenever I asked gentle questions about her schedule or why she seemed so distant. "I'm trying to build a career, and you're making it difficult with all these suspicious questions." Her defensiveness should have been a red flag, but I believed her explanations because I wanted to trust my wife more than I wanted to protect myself from painful truths. The evidence that something was seriously wrong came when she accidentally dropped a receipt while emptying her purse. It was for a hotel room for 2 people, booked during one of her supposed late work nights. When I asked about it, she claimed it was for a company retreat that had been canceled at the last minute, and that she had forgotten to mention it because it wasn't important. But I kept that receipt, sensing that it might be important later. One morning, while we were having coffee, Mara delivered a threat that made her intentions crystal clear, though she disguised it as casual conversation about our financial situation. "You know, Thomas, I've been thinking about our finances lately," she said, stirring her coffee with the same calm tone she used to discuss weekend plans. "If we ever got divorced, I could probably take everything. You don't make much compared to what I earn at the firm." She said it so casually, like she was discussing the weather rather than threatening to destroy my life and security. Her tone was almost conversational, which made the threat even more chilling than if she had been screaming or emotional. The comments seemed to come out of nowhere, since we hadn't been arguing or discussing any problems in our marriage. It felt like she was testing the waters, seeing how I would react to the idea of divorce and financial devastation. "Why would you say something like that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level despite the shock of hearing my wife casually threaten to steal everything I had worked for throughout our marriage. "I'm just being realistic about how these things work," she replied with a shrug. "Women usually do better in divorce proceedings, especially when they can prove their husbands weren't supportive of their careers." That night, I started researching state laws about legal home surveillance and evidence gathering for divorce proceedings. After learning about the legal requirements for home surveillance, I decided to install security cameras throughout our house. I made sure everything was completely legal by posting clear notices about the cameras and following all state laws about recording in shared living spaces. The cameras were visible and properly disclosed, with signs posted in every room explaining that the house was under surveillance. Mara saw the signs but barely seemed to pay attention to them, probably assuming they were just standard home security measures. "Why are you suddenly so paranoid about break-ins?" she asked when she noticed the first camera in our living room. But her question was casual rather than concerned or suspicious. "I've been hearing about more burglaries in our neighborhood," I explained, which was partially true. "I want to make sure our house and belongings are protected when we're both at work." Mara nodded and went back to scrolling through her phone, apparently unconcerned about being recorded in her own home. Her lack of worry about the cameras told me that she didn't think she was doing anything that needed to be hidden. But that first night after installation, the dining room camera picked up her voice during a phone call she thought I couldn't hear. "He's too stupid to ever leave me, and too weak to fight for anything if he tried." The recording quality was perfect, capturing every word of her cruel assessment of my character and our marriage. Mara announced that she had a weekend business conference in the next city, a company retreat that would require her to stay overnight at a hotel with her colleagues for team-building exercises and client presentations. "It's mandatory for all the senior staff," she explained while packing her suitcase. "The company is really investing in our professional development this quarter." But the camera in our bedroom captured her packing lingerie that she had never worn for me during our 12 years of marriage. Expensive pieces that were still in their original packaging, clearly purchased for someone else's eyes. She packed silk nightgowns, lace underwear, and perfume that I had never smelled on her when she came home to me. The suitcase looked more like preparation for a romantic getaway than a professional business conference. During her trip, she FaceTimed me from what she claimed was her hotel conference room, showing me a generic business setting that could have been any hotel meeting space. She talked about presentations and networking events, maintaining the illusion of a work-related trip. But something about the lighting and background didn't look right. The conference room looked more like a hotel suite than a professional meeting space, and I could hear soft music in the background that seemed inappropriate for business meetings. When she returned home, she was glowing with happiness in a way I hadn't seen for months, but she attributed it to successful business deals and career opportunities. After Mara returned from her supposed business trip, she began staging arguments and trying to provoke me into losing my temper. She would make cutting comments about my appearance, my job, and my personality, clearly hoping to get me to react with anger or frustration. "You've really let yourself go since we got married," she would say during dinner, her voice designed to sting. "I sometimes wonder what I saw in you when we first met." Her insults were calculated and personal, targeting insecurities that she knew would hurt me most. But I had learned to stay quiet and calm, understanding that she was trying to bait me into behavior that she could use against me later. "Are you even listening to me?" she would demand when I didn't take her bait. You just sit there like a zombie instead of defending yourself or showing any passion about our relationship. I recognized her tactics for what they were. Attempts to create evidence of an angry, unstable husband who might be emotionally abusive or threatening to his wife's safety and well-being. But the camera in our kitchen captured her real motivation during a phone call she made while thinking I was at work. I'm trying to make him look abusive or unstable for the divorce proceedings. If I can get him to yell at me or threaten me, I'll have everything I need to take him for all he's worth. Her voice was calm and calculating as she discussed destroying my reputation and financial security for her own benefit. While checking our credit report online, I discovered that Mara had opened a secret credit card account using my name and social security number, racking up thousands of dollars in charges that I had never authorized or made myself. The fraud alert from our bank led me to call the credit card company, where I learned that someone claiming to be me had applied for the account over the phone, providing personal information that only my wife would have access to. I requested recordings of the application calls, and the credit card company provided audio files that clearly captured Mara's voice pretending to be me during the application process. "Yes, this is Thomas Hale," her voice said on the recording, using a slightly deeper tone to try to sound male. "I'd like to apply for a credit account that my wife can use for household expenses." The quality of the recording was clear enough to prove that she had committed identity theft and credit fraud, using my financial information to fund expenses that were probably related to her affair. When I checked the charges on the fraudulent account, they included restaurants I had never been to, hotels I had never stayed at, and purchases from stores I had never shopped at. The pattern of charges told the story of someone funding a secret relationship with money stolen from her husband's credit, creating evidence that would be devastating in divorce proceedings where financial misconduct could affect asset distribution. One afternoon while I was at work, our living room camera captured the voice of a man I had never met talking with Mara in our house. He was clearly comfortable in our space, speaking like someone who had been there many times before. "Is your husband always this clueless about what's going on in his own house?" the man asked, his voice carrying amusement and contempt for me. Mara's laughter filled our living room as she responded to his question about my awareness of their relationship. "Thomas is completely oblivious to everything that matters. He notices what's for dinner and whether his favorite TV shows are recording, but he has no idea what's happening in his own marriage." Their conversation continued with increasing boldness as they discussed me like I was some kind of obstacle to be managed rather than a person whose life they were destroying through their deception. "He works such predictable hours that we basically have the whole house to ourselves every weekday afternoon," Mara explained, apparently having planned their meetings around my schedule for weeks or months. The man's voice carried satisfaction as he commented on their situation. "It's almost too easy. Most cheating wives have to sneak around, but you've got a husband who doesn't pay attention to anything." But the most devastating part of their conversation came when he asked about their future plans. "When do you think you'll finally leave him and we can stop all this sneaking around?" Mara's answer would provide crucial evidence for the divorce proceedings. Mara's response to her lover's question about their timeline revealed the full scope of their plan to destroy my life and steal everything I had worked for during our marriage. "Once I file for divorce, we'll have his house," she said, raising a wine glass in what appeared to be a toast to my future misery. "My lawyer says that with the right evidence about his emotional abuse and financial control, I can get the house, most of his savings, and probably alimony for several years." They were drinking wine in my kitchen, celebrating their plans for my financial ruin while using my dishes and sitting at the table where Mara and I had shared thousands of meals over 12 years of marriage. "It's perfect," her lover responded, clinking his glass against hers. "You get rid of a husband you don't want anymore, and we get to start our life together without having to worry about money or housing." Their conversation revealed that this wasn't just an affair driven by passion or emotional connection. It was a calculated scheme to steal my assets and transfer them to someone who would replace me in Mara's life. "The best part is that he'll never see it coming," Mara continued, her voice full of satisfaction about the deception she had been planning. "Thomas trusts me completely, so he won't prepare for the divorce or protect his finances until it's too late." When her lover asked, "When do you want to file for divorce?" Mara answered with chilling certainty, Soon. Very soon. I'm almost done setting up all the evidence I'll need to destroy him in court. The next morning, I took a USB drive containing the most damaging recordings to the office of attorney James Brooks, a divorce lawyer whose reputation for protecting men's rights in family court was well known throughout our community. I sat across from his desk and calmly handed him the drive without explaining what it contained, wanting to see his reaction to the evidence without influencing his opinion through my own interpretation of events. James inserted the USB drive into his computer and began watching the recordings. After just 20 seconds of footage showing Mara and her lover in our house, his expression changed from professional interest to obvious shock. "Thomas," he said, pausing the video and looking at me with the respect due to someone who had been smart enough to document his wife's betrayal thoroughly. "This is case-ending evidence. I've been practicing family law for 25 years, and I've never seen documentation this comprehensive or damaging." He fast-forwarded through hours of recordings, stopping occasionally to take notes about particularly relevant conversations or admissions of guilt that would be crucial for our legal strategy. "Your wife has essentially confessed to adultery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft," James explained, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who knew we had an unwinnable case. "Any judge who sees this evidence will award you everything you're asking for, and probably more." He leaned back in his chair and delivered the advice that would guide our preparation. "Now I'm going to tell you exactly how to prepare for the most important court date of your life." Following James's advice, I began documenting Mara's behavior more carefully, looking for additional evidence that would support our case beyond the recordings from our home security system. I discovered that Mara had a second phone that she used exclusively for communicating with her lover, keeping it hidden in her car and bringing it into the house only when she thought I wasn't paying attention to her activities. Rather than trying to access the phone directly, which could create legal problems with privacy violations, I simply filmed the lock screen when she left it on our kitchen counter, capturing preview messages that showed the content of their communications. One afternoon, a text message popped up on the screen while I was recording. "Can't wait till your pathetic husband is out of the picture and we can be together openly. He's such a fool for trusting you all this time." The message preview was visible long enough for me to capture clear video evidence of their ongoing conspiracy and their contempt for me as a person who deserved to be deceived and betrayed. Another message preview revealed their timeline. "How much longer do we have to pretend? I'm getting tired of sneaking around and acting like we're just friends when people ask about us." Mara's response, which appeared as she was typing, showed their impatience with maintaining their deception. "Just a few more weeks. Once the divorce is filed and I have legal control of his assets, we can stop hiding our relationship." One evening, Mara approached me with what appeared to be genuine emotion, sitting me down at our kitchen table and producing tears that seemed real until I understood what she was actually doing. "Thomas, I've been doing a lot of thinking about our marriage lately," she said, her voice breaking with what appeared to be sincere sadness about our relationship. "I don't think we're working anymore as a couple. We've grown apart, and I think we both deserve to be with people who make us truly happy." Her performance was Oscar-worthy, with perfectly timed tears and voice trembles that would have convinced me completely if I hadn't already known about her affair and her plans to destroy me financially through divorce proceedings. "I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore," she continued, using language that sounded like it came from relationship counseling or self-help books about ending marriages gracefully. "I think we should consider separation so we can both find the happiness we deserve." I listened to her rehearsed speech with appropriate sadness, playing the role of a husband who was hearing this devastating news for the first time instead of someone who had been preparing for this conversation for weeks. "I understand," I said quietly, reaching across the table to hold her hand like a supportive husband should. "If that's what you need to be happy, then we should talk about how to handle this properly." But the hallway camera captured what happened immediately after our conversation. Mara wiped her tears away instantly and smiled with satisfaction about her successful performance. The next week, Mara staged what appeared to be a break-in at our house, knocking over a lamp and scattering papers around our living room to create evidence that someone had entered our home illegally and violently. When I came home from work, she was waiting by the front door with obvious distress, claiming that she had surprised an intruder who had fled when he heard her coming home early from work. "I was so scared," she said, her voice shaking with what appeared to be genuine fear. "He could have hurt me if I had come home just a few minutes earlier. I think we should call the police and file a report about the break-in." Her plan was clearly designed to create additional evidence of instability and danger in our home that would support her claims about needing protection from me during divorce proceedings. But the cameras had captured everything that actually happened. Mara herself had knocked over the lamp and created the mess, then waited by the door to deliver her performance about the supposed break-in. The footage showed her carefully arranging the scene to look realistic, even going so far as to dishevel her own appearance and create scratches on her arms that would appear to be evidence of a struggle with an intruder. "Should we call the police?" I asked, knowing that a police report based on her false claims could create legal complications later. "Actually, let me think about it," Mara said, apparently realizing that involving law enforcement in her fabricated crime scene might create problems if they investigated too carefully or asked questions she couldn't answer convincingly. 2 days later, Mara handed me divorce papers with the confident smile of someone who believed she held all the cards in our upcoming legal battle. "I've already filed everything with the court," she announced, setting the papers on our kitchen table like she was serving me breakfast. "My lawyer says this should be pretty straightforward since we don't have children and most of our assets are clearly mine anyway." The papers were filled with false claims about my behavior during our marriage, including accusations of emotional abuse, financial control, and threats against her safety that would justify giving her everything she was demanding. "Don't bother fighting this, Thomas," she said, her voice carrying the casual cruelty of someone who enjoyed watching her victim suffer. "You'll lose, and fighting will just make this more expensive and embarrassing for both of us." Her confidence was based on lies she had prepared for months, fake evidence she had tried to create, and her assumption that I was too weak or stupid to defend myself effectively in court. "I understand," I said calmly, signing my acknowledgement of the divorce papers without argument or protest. "If this is what you want, then I won't make it difficult for you." My compliance seemed to satisfy Mara completely, confirming her belief that I would be an easy target who would surrender everything without a fight. But what she didn't know was that James and I had been preparing for exactly this moment, and that signing the papers was just the first step in springing the trap we had been setting for months. With divorce papers filed and legal proceedings officially started, Mara became even more careless about hiding her affair, apparently believing that her victory was guaranteed and that there was no longer any need for secrecy. She brought her lover back to our house in broad daylight, walking through our front door with him like they were already a married couple who owned the property together. "It feels good not to have to sneak around anymore," I heard her tell him as they walked through our living room toward the bedroom. "In a few weeks, this will all be ours and Thomas will be living in some tiny apartment somewhere." Their boldness was exactly what James had predicted would happen once Mara felt confident about her legal position. People who commit fraud often become reckless when they think they've already won, providing even more evidence of their crimes. They walked directly into our bedroom, apparently planning to celebrate their anticipated victory in the same bed where I had first caught them months earlier. But this time, I was prepared with perfect camera angles that captured everything they did and said in high-definition video that would be admissible in court proceedings. The bedroom camera was positioned to record the entire room clearly, including faces, voices, and actions that would leave no doubt about what was happening in my house, while divorce proceedings were supposedly based on my inadequacy as a husband. The conversation between Mara and her lover in our bedroom provided the smoking gun evidence that would destroy her case completely and expose her lies to the court. "What if your husband somehow finds out about us before the divorce is finalized?" her lover asked, apparently having some last-minute concerns about their plan. "Could that cause problems for you in court?" Mara's response revealed her complete confidence in her deception and her contempt for both me and the legal system she was trying to manipulate. "He won't find out anything," she said with certainty. "Thomas is an idiot who believes everything I tell him. Even if someone told him I was having an affair, he'd probably apologize to me for not being a better husband." Her cruel assessment of my character and intelligence provided perfect evidence of her lack of respect for our marriage and her willingness to lie under oath during divorce proceedings. But her next statement went even further, revealing the full scope of her criminal intentions. Once I'm done with him in court, Thomas will leave with nothing. My lawyer says I can get the house, the savings, the retirement accounts, and monthly support payments for years. The camera captured every word of her admission that she was committing fraud to steal my assets, using false claims and fabricated evidence to manipulate the legal system for her own financial gain. He'll spend the rest of his life paying for the privilege of being married to me, she concluded with satisfaction, apparently enjoying the thought of my permanent financial suffering. As our court date approached, the camera in our bathroom captured Mara rehearsing the lies she planned to tell during her testimony, practicing her performance in front of our mirror like an actress preparing for the role of her life. Your Honor, my husband has been emotionally abusive throughout our marriage, she practiced, her voice carrying fake emotion that would be convincing to someone who hadn't seen her real personality. He yells at me regularly and has threatened to hurt me if I ever try to leave him. Every word of her rehearsed testimony was a complete fabrication, but her performance was polished and convincing enough to potentially fool a judge who didn't have access to evidence of her real character and behavior. Thomas controls all our finances and won't let me have access to my own money, she continued, practicing accusations that were the opposite of our actual relationship dynamics. He monitors my every move and becomes violent when I try to maintain friendships or spend time away from him. The camera captured dozens of hours of her rehearsing these false claims, providing evidence that her testimony would be premeditated perjury rather than honest recollections of our marriage. When I shared the final recording with James, his response confirmed that we had everything needed to destroy her credibility completely. Thomas, after the judge sees this evidence, your wife's case won't just collapse. She'll be lucky if she isn't charged with perjury and fraud. Court day arrived with gray winter weather that seemed appropriate for the reckoning that was about to unfold in Judge Martinez's courtroom. Mara testified first, delivering her rehearsed performance with tears and emotional breaks that would have been completely convincing if the judge hadn't been about to see evidence of her real character and motivations. Your Honor, I've been trapped in an abusive marriage for 12 years, she said, her voice breaking with apparent pain. My husband has systematically isolated me from friends and family while controlling every aspect of my life through financial manipulation and emotional threats. She described a marriage that bore no resemblance to our actual relationship, painting me as a controlling monster who had terrorized her into submission through years of systematic abuse and intimidation. I finally found the courage to leave when I realized that his threats were escalating and I was genuinely afraid for my safety. Mara concluded, dabbing her eyes with tissues that suggested genuine trauma rather than calculated deception. Her performance was flawless, and I could see that some people in the courtroom were looking at me with suspicion and disgust, probably wondering what kind of man could terrorize such a seemingly vulnerable woman. But James was prepared with evidence that would expose every lie she had just told under oath. Your Honor, James announced as he stood up, we have video evidence that will contradict every claim the plaintiff has made during her testimony. Judge Martinez agreed to review our video evidence, and the courtroom fell completely silent as James set up his laptop and began playing the recordings from our home security system. The first clip showed Mara and her lover in our living room, discussing their plans to steal my assets and leave me with nothing after the divorce proceedings were complete. Gasps echoed through the courtroom as people heard Mara's real voice saying things like, "Thomas is an idiot, and he'll never see this coming," with the casual cruelty of someone discussing a business transaction. The second clip captured her rehearsing false testimony in our bathroom mirror, practicing the exact lies she had just told under oath with the calculated precision of someone who had been planning perjury for months. But the most devastating evidence was the recording of her admitting that all her claims about abuse and control were fabricated. I need to make him look unstable and dangerous so I can get everything in the divorce. Mara's face drained of color as she heard her own voice confessing to crimes that could result in serious legal consequences beyond just losing the divorce case. The judge stopped the video after several minutes and looked directly at Mara with the stern expression of someone who had been lied to in his own courtroom. Mrs. Hale, Judge Martinez said formally, These recordings appear to contradict your sworn testimony. Do you have any explanation for these discrepancies? Mara's attorney immediately requested a private conference with his client, and I could see him whispering furiously as he realized that their entire case had been destroyed by evidence he had no idea existed. Your Honor, we need time to review this new evidence and prepare an appropriate response, the attorney said, clearly trying to buy time to figure out how to salvage a situation that had become legally and ethically impossible to defend. But Judge Martinez had heard enough evidence to understand exactly what had been happening in his courtroom and what kind of fraud had been attempted against the legal system. Counselor, your client has just been caught committing perjury under oath in my courtroom, the judge replied sternly. The evidence clearly shows that her testimony was fabricated and that she has been attempting to defraud the court and her husband through systematic deception. The attorney tried to argue that the recordings might be inadmissible or that there could be explanations for the apparent contradictions, but his arguments sounded weak even to his own ears. Your Honor, perhaps my client misspoke or was confused about certain details, he offered desperately, apparently unable to come up with any believable defense for the recorded evidence of premeditated fraud. Judge Martinez interrupted him with a question that would end any remaining pretense. Counselor, does your client want to amend her testimony before this court makes its final ruling on asset distribution and the allegations of abuse? The question was really an opportunity for Mara to confess to her crimes and possibly avoid criminal charges, but her response would determine the final outcome of our case. Judge Martinez spent only 10 minutes reviewing the evidence before delivering a ruling that exceeded even James's most optimistic predictions for our case. After reviewing the video and audio evidence presented by the defendant, this court finds that the plaintiff has committed perjury, attempted fraud, and systematic deception during these proceedings, the judge announced with the authority of someone delivering justice. All claims of abuse, control, and financial manipulation are hereby dismissed as fabricated evidence designed to defraud both this court and the defendant, he continued, his voice carrying obvious disgust for the criminal behavior he had witnessed. The court awards the defendant full ownership of the marital home, all savings and retirement accounts, and all other assets acquired during the marriage, Judge Martinez concluded, giving me everything I had been fighting to protect. Furthermore, the plaintiff is ordered to pay the defendant's legal fees and court costs, and this court is referring evidence of perjury to the district attorney for potential criminal prosecution. Mara sat in stunned silence as she processed the complete destruction of her plans and the reality that her criminal behavior would have consequences far beyond just losing the divorce case. Instead of walking away with my house and life savings, she was leaving with nothing and facing potential jail time for the crimes she had committed in pursuit of money that was never rightfully hers. The justice I had worked for months to achieve had been delivered through legal channels that protected both my assets and my reputation from someone who had tried to destroy both through calculated lies. Outside the courthouse, Mara made one last desperate attempt to salvage some kind of relationship or financial arrangement, approaching me as I walked to my car with James. Thomas, wait, she called out, her voice carrying a mixture of panic and false remorse. We can still work this out without all this legal drama. We've been together for 12 years, and that has to count for something. Her sudden change from confident fraud to desperate pleading revealed how completely her situation had changed in just a few hours of courtroom proceedings. We can go to counseling or try to rebuild our marriage, she continued, apparently willing to say anything that might prevent her from losing everything she had been counting on stealing from me. But I had learned too much about Mara's real character to believe that any reconciliation could be genuine or lasting. Someone who was capable of systematic fraud and perjury couldn't be trusted with a second chance to destroy my life. No, Mara, I said calmly, my voice carrying the peace that comes from knowing you've protected yourself from someone who wanted to harm you. I'm done with lies, manipulation, and people who think my kindness makes me stupid. We don't have anything to work out, I continued, walking toward my car. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences of those choices. James handed me the finalized divorce decree that made our separation permanent and legally binding. At home that evening, I walked through my house and carefully uninstalled all the security cameras that had served their purpose in protecting me from someone who had tried to steal my life and security through fraud and deception. Each camera had captured evidence that exposed Mara's real character and saved me from financial ruin that would have taken years to recover from, if recovery had even been possible. As I removed the last camera from our bedroom, I looked into the lens one final time and spoke to anyone who might understand the importance of protecting yourself from people who mistake trust for weakness. Revenge doesn't require rage or hatred, I said calmly, thinking about everything I had learned during this painful experience. Sometimes, all you need is patience, careful preparation, and a commitment to letting the truth speak for itself. People who lie and cheat often destroy themselves when you give them enough rope to hang themselves with their own actions, I continued, reflecting on how Mara's overconfidence and cruelty had provided the evidence needed to defeat her schemes. I turned off the camera and set it aside, walking through my quiet house that was finally free from deception and betrayal. The silence felt peaceful rather than lonely, representing a new beginning rather than an ending, and a future built on truth rather than lies. Sometimes the best victory is simply being free from people who don't deserve your trust, I said to myself, closing the door on a chapter of my life that had taught me valuable lessons about protecting what matters most.